Zarathel pressed her back against the cold metal wall of the alley, holding her two children close. The morning rain fell steadily on the blue scales of her skin, each drop feeling like another reminder of how far she had fallen. Just 3 months ago, she lived in a decent apartment in the middle districts. Now she was hiding behind garbage containers, hoping the purity guards wouldn't find them. Her son Kex, only 8 years old, looked up at her with worried eyes. His small hand gripped hers tightly. "Mama, why do the other people look at us like that?" Zarathel's heart broke a little more. How could she explain to a child that their society saw him as broken? That because he could only hear thoughts instead of sending them, the Purity Council labeled him defective? "They just don't understand us yet, little one," she whispered, brushing his dark hair away from his forehead. Her daughter Mira, just 6 years old, was drawing pictures in the dirt with a stick. Even now, even homeless and hungry, the child found ways to create beauty. But on Zephyria, her complete lack of telepathic abilities made her worthless in the eyes of their people. The sound of heavy boots echoed through the alley. Zarathel quickly picked up Mira and grabbed Kex's hand. "We have to go, now!" They ran through the winding streets of the lower city, past the factories that pumped dark smoke into the gray sky. Other Zephyrians moved away from them as they passed, pulling their children closer and covering their noses as if the family carried some terrible disease. Zarathel remembered when she was one of those people, before she fell in love with Dexral, a male from the worker caste, before she chose love over status, before the council stripped away her engineering license and declared her children unfit for society. They ducked into an abandoned building that used to be a school. The windows were broken and graffiti covered the walls, but it was dry and no one would look for them here. "I'm hungry," Mira said softly, settling into her mother's lap. Zarathel checked their small bag. 1 nutrition bar left and barely enough credits for another day. She broke the bar into 3 pieces, giving the larger portions to her children. "Tell me about the stars again, Mama," Kex said as he ate. Zarathel looked up through a hole in the roof where a few stars were visible despite the city lights. "They say there are thousands of worlds out there, places where different kinds of people live together, places where maybe—" She stopped herself. Hope was dangerous when you had nothing left to lose. The next morning brought more bad news. Notice had been posted on every street corner, written in the harsh symbols of official Zephyrian law. Zarathel read it with growing fear. "By order of the Purity Council, the female Zarathel and her genetic deviants are no longer permitted to remain on Zephyrian soil. They have 72 hours to depart the planet or face cleansing procedures. Cleansing procedures. Such clean words for something so final." Other Zephyrians gathered around the notices, nodding in approval. "About time," one muttered. "Those things have been contaminating our district for months. Things. Not people. Things." Zarathel pulled her children away before they could understand what the notice meant. But Kex, with his ability to sense emotions, looked up at her with knowing eyes. "We have to leave, don't we?" he asked quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. They spent the day trying to book passage off-world. The first transport captain took one look at their identification cards and shook his head. "Sorry, I don't carry outcasts. Bad for business." The second captain offered to take them, but wanted payment that was 10 times their meager savings. "Hazard pay," he explained with a cruel smile. "Never know what kind of genetic problems might spread." By evening, Zarathel was desperate. They had found one captain willing to take them for a price they could barely afford, but his ship wouldn't leave for 2 days. They needed somewhere to hide until then. The old factory district was mostly empty at night. Zarathel found a spot behind some machinery where they could sleep without being seen. She wrapped her arms around both children, using her body heat to keep them warm. "Will the new place be better?" Mira asked sleepily. "I hope so, baby. I really hope so." But hope felt fragile when you were lying on a cold factory floor, watching your children shiver, knowing that tomorrow might bring the purity guards to your door. Keck suddenly sat up straight, his eyes wide. "Mama, someone's coming. I can feel their thoughts. They're angry." The sound of vehicles filled the night air. Bright lights swept across the factory walls, searching. Zarathel gathered the children quickly, moving deeper into the shadows of Vo. "The machinery! Find them!" a voice called out. "The council wants this cleaned up before the morning shift." They moved like ghosts through the factory, Zarathel's 4 arms allowing her to carry both children when they needed to climb or jump. Her engineering knowledge of the district's layout helped them stay ahead of the search teams, but they couldn't run forever. And with only 1 day left, the transport to the Outer Rim territories was starting to feel like their only chance at survival. As dawn broke over the gray city, Zarathel looked back at the skyline one last time. This world had been her home, her children's birthplace. But home was supposed to be a place where you belonged. Now they were heading into the unknown, with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the hope that somewhere among the stars, there might be people who would see them as more than genetic mistakes. The hardest part wasn't leaving Zephyria behind. The hardest part was not knowing if they would survive long enough to find somewhere new to call home. The cargo ship Stellar Drift smelled like rust and broken dreams. Zarathel sat in the corner of the passenger hold with her children, trying to make herself as small as possible. The other travelers kept their distance, whispering among themselves whenever they looked her way. Captain Voss had seemed kind enough when they boarded. He was a weathered Altarian with gray fur and tired eyes who asked no questions about their background. "Credits are credits," he had said when Zarathel handed over their last savings. "Find a spot and keep quiet." For the first 2 days of the journey, everything went smoothly. Kex spent his time listening to the emotions of the crew members, learning to identify different feelings without understanding the words. Mira drew pictures on scraps of paper that other passengers had thrown away, creating colorful birds and flowers from her imagination. But on the 3rd day, everything changed. Group of Zephyrian merchants had boarded at the last stop. They were traveling to the Outer Rim to set up new trading posts, their expensive clothes and confident manner marking them as high-caste citizens. When they saw Zarathel and her children, their faces twisted with disgust. "Captain," the lead merchant called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Why are there outcasts on your ship?" Captain Voss looked uncomfortable. "They paid their fare like everyone else." "Do you know what they are?" Another merchant demanded. "Genetic deviants. Their very presence contaminates the air we breathe. We demand you remove them immediately." The other passengers began to murmur nervously. A family of Centaurians moved their luggage away from Zarathel's corner. 2 Rigelian traders covered their breathing apparatus and shook their heads in obvious disapproval. "Look, I can't just throw people off a ship in deep space," Captain Voss said, but his voice was weakening. "Then drop them at the next station," the merchant insisted. "We represent the Zephyrian Trade Consortium. Our business is worth far more than whatever these creatures paid you." Zarathel felt her heart sink as she watched the captain's expression change. She had seen that look before, the moment when profit became more important than compassion. "We'll reach Kepler Station in 6 hours, the captain said finally, not meeting her eyes. "I'm sorry, but you'll have to disembark there." Kepler Station hung in the void like a rusty metal flower, its spinning sections creating artificial gravity for the thousands of beings who called it home. It was known throughout the sector as a place where anyone could find work, trade goods, or disappear entirely. But as their shuttle approached the docking bay, Zarathel wondered if even this lawless outpost would welcome her family. The station's corridors were crowded with dozens of different species. Humans in blue coveralls worked alongside insectoid Vrakons. Tall, thin Etherians floated past crystalline builders, their business deals conducted in a dozen different languages. For a moment, Zarathel felt hopeful. Surely in this mix of cultures, 3 more aliens wouldn't matter. She was wrong. Their first stop was the housing office, a cramped booth run by a bored-looking Centaurian who barely glanced up from his data pad. Need a place to stay? Got bunks starting at 50 credits per night. Zarathel placed their few remaining credits on the counter. We need something cheap. Just for a few days while we find work. The Centaurian looked at their identification cards, and his expression immediately soured. Zephyrian outcasts? Sorry. No rooms available. But you just said you had bunks available, Kex said, confusion clear in his young voice. Not for your kind, the Centaurian replied coldly. Next, they tried 3 more housing complexes with the same result. Word was spreading quickly through the station's communication networks. By evening, even the cheapest flop houses were turning them away. They spent their first night sleeping in a maintenance corridor, huddled together near a warm air recycling unit. Mira was developing a cough, and Zarathel could feel fever building in her small body. The next day brought new disappointments. The job placement office refused to process their applications. Food vendors wouldn't serve them, claiming health regulations. Even the public medical clinic turned them away, saying they didn't treat contaminated individuals. Mama, why won't anyone help us? Mira asked weakly, her voice hoarse from coughing. Zarathel had no answer. She had hoped that leaving Zephyria would mean leaving behind the prejudice and hatred. Instead, it seemed to follow them wherever they went. Their situation became desperate when station security arrived on the second day. The officer, a heavily muscled Draknari with ritual scars covering his arms, looked down at them with obvious distaste. You've got 24 hours to find transport off this station, he growled. The Zephyrian Merchant Guild has filed a complaint. They say you're disrupting trade and affecting station morale. Where are we supposed to go? Zarathel asked. We have no money left for transport. The security officer shrugged. Not my problem. 24 hours, or you'll be escorted to the airlocks. That night, as they sheltered near the waste recycling, units in the station's lowest level, Mira's fever spiked dangerously high. Her small body shook with chills, and her breathing became labored. Zarathel used discarded ice packs from the recycling bins to try to cool her daughter's burning forehead, but she knew it wasn't enough. Kex, she whispered to her son, I need you to use your gift. Can you sense if there are any doctors or medical people nearby? Anyone who might help us? The boy closed his eyes, reaching out with his telepathic abilities. For several minutes, he searched through the emotional signatures of the beings around them. Most showed indifference. Some showed disgust, but then, There's someone, he said suddenly. In the clinic level, their feelings are different. Sad, but kind. They feel sorry for someone. It was their last hope. As dawn approached and their deadline grew closer, Zarathel picked up her burning daughter and took her son's hand. They would go to this person. Kex had sensed, and if they were turned away again, at least they would have tried everything. The clinic level was cleaner than the lower sections, with bright lights and the smell of medical supplies. Zarathel hesitated at the entrance, knowing that once again they might face rejection. But Mira's labored breathing reminded her that they had no choice. Sometimes, when you have nothing left to lose, all you can do is hope that somewhere in the vast universe, there might be one person willing to see you as more than the worst thing others believe about you. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was having another sleepless night in her small clinic. She had come to Kepler Station 6 months ago as part of a volunteer medical program, hoping to help the forgotten people who lived in the Outer Rim territories. What she hadn't expected was how much the work would change her. Elena was a xenobiologist by training, someone who studied the biology of different alien species. She had always believed that diversity made life stronger, not weaker. But here on the station, she saw how prejudice and fear could destroy lives just as surely as any disease. She was reviewing patient files when she heard a commotion outside. Through her clinic window, she could see a small family huddled near the waste recycling units. The mother, clearly an alien with blue-scaled skin and 4 arms, was frantically trying to cool down a small child using discarded ice packs. Elena had seen desperate parents before, but something about this scene made her heart ache. The mother's movements showed such love, such determination to help her child despite having so little to work with. The older child, a boy, stood guard over them both, his young face serious beyond his years. Without thinking, Elena grabbed her medical bag and stepped outside. "Excuse me," she called out gently in Galactic Standard. "Is your daughter sick?" The mother looked up with startled eyes. Elena could see the fear there, the expectation of rejection that had become second nature. "Please," the mother said in broken Standard. "She burns with fever. I try to help, but—" Elena knelt down beside them, ignoring the looks from other station residents who were starting to gather. The little girl was clearly very ill, her breathing shallow and her skin burning with fever. "I'm a doctor," Elena said softly. "May I examine her?" The mother's eyes filled with tears. "You help us? But we are outcasts." "I help anyone who needs it," Elena replied firmly. "That's what doctors do." She carefully lifted the child, surprised by how light she was. The family followed her into the clinic, where Elena immediately began running diagnostic tests. The boy, who she learned was named Kex, stayed close to his mother while watching everything with intelligent eyes. "What's her name?" Elena asked as she worked. "Mira," the mother replied. "I am Zarathel. This is my son Kex." Elena smiled at them, both. "Hello, Zarathel." "Hello, Kex. I'm Elena, and I'm going to make sure Mira gets better." The tests showed that Mira had a severe bacterial infection that was completely treatable with the right antibiotics. As Elena prepared the medication, she listened to Zarathel's story with growing anger at the injustice of it all. "So you were forced to leave your home planet because your children are different?" Elena asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Zarathel nodded sadly. "On Zephyria, children must have perfect telepathic abilities. Kex can only receive thoughts, not send them. Mira has no telepathic abilities at all. This makes them unwanted." Elena looked at the boy, who was gently holding his sister's hand while she slept off the fever medication. "Can you hear my thoughts right now, Kex?" The boy nodded shyly. "You're thinking that what happened to us was wrong, and you're wondering how people could be so cruel to children." "That's exactly right," Elena said. "And you know what? I think your ability is amazing. You can understand how people are feeling without them saying a word. That's not a disability. That's a gift." Kex's face brightened for the first time since Elena had met him. "Really?" "Absolutely. And Mira's art that you described? Creating beauty from nothing is one of the most human things. I mean, one of the most wonderful things anyone can do." As Mira's fever broke and she began to recover, Elena learned more about the family's talents. Zarathel had been a skilled engineer before losing her job due to her social status. Her 4 arms allowed her to work on complex machinery in ways that other species couldn't manage. She understood systems and how to fix them. "I worked on atmospheric processors," Zarathel explained. "Big machines that make air breathable on new worlds. But when the council marked us as outcasts, they took away my license." Elena was fascinated. The station had been having problems with its air recycling system for months. The current engineers couldn't figure out what was wrong, but maybe someone with Zarathel's background could help. "Would you be willing to look at our air system?" Elena asked. "We could pay you for consulting work." Zarathel's eyes went wide. "You would trust me with something so important?" "Why wouldn't I? You're qualified. You need work, and we need help. Seems perfect to me." Over the next few days, while Mira recovered in the clinic's back room, Elena watched the family begin to heal in ways that went beyond medicine. Keck started helping her with patience, using his empathic abilities to comfort, frighten children, and identify pain that medical scanners might miss. Mira, feeling better, began drawing pictures of the different aliens she saw, creating artwork that made everyone smile. And Zarathel proved Elena right about the air system. In just 2 days, she identified and fixed problems that had puzzled the station's engineers for months. But their peaceful time was interrupted when Station Administrator Grex arrived at the clinic, his centaurian features twisted with displeasure. "Dr. Rodriguez," he said formally, "I've received complaints about the individuals you're harboring here." "They're my patients," Elena replied calmly, "and they're also helping solve our air quality problems. The Zephyrian merchants are threatening to take their business elsewhere if these outcasts remain on the station. That's a lot of lost revenue." Elena felt her temper rising. "So we're putting profit over helping people now?" "This is a business, Doctor, not a charity." "Then maybe it should be both," Elena said firmly. "These people have done nothing wrong except be born different. If we turn them away, what does that say about who we are?" Grex's expression softened slightly. "Look, I understand your position, but I have a station to run. The Zephyrian trade consortium brings in significant income. I can't ignore their concerns." Elena knew she was fighting an uphill battle, but she wasn't ready to give up. These people had already been rejected by too many others. She wouldn't be another person who failed them. "Give me time," she said. "Let me find another solution." That night, as she watched the family sleeping peacefully in her clinic for the first time in weeks, Elena made a decision. She opened her communication console and began typing a message to her contacts in the Terran Federation. Sometimes, when local authorities won't do the right thing, you have to reach out to people who will. And Elena knew that humanity's greatest strength had always been its willingness to help those who needed it most, regardless of what species they belonged to or where they came from. The family had found someone willing to fight for them. Now Elena just had to make sure that fight would be enough. Elena spent the next morning sending urgent messages to every contact she had in the Terran Federation. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she documented everything about Zarathel's family, their skills, their situation, and the injustice they had faced. She knew that somewhere in human space, there had to be officials who would see what she saw, a family deserving of protection, not persecution. Meanwhile, word was spreading through the station about the alien family living in the medical clinic. But not all the talk was negative. Captain Torres, who ran the cargo bay operations, had heard about Zarathel's work on the air systems. "Doc," he said, poking his head into the clinic, "I heard your friend there fixed our breathing problems in 2 days. Is that true?" Elena nodded toward Zarathel, who was teaching Mira how to read Galactic Standard using medical charts. "Ask her yourself." Captain Torres, a weather-beaten human with kind eyes, approached the Zephyrian mother carefully. "Ma'am, I manage the main cargo operations. We've been having trouble with our atmospheric processors for months. Would you be willing to take a look?" Zarathel looked surprised. After weeks of rejection, she wasn't used to people asking for her help. "You want me to work on your systems?" "If you're willing. And if you can fix them like you fixed the medical bay's air recyclers, there's good money in it." For the first time since Elena had met her, Zarathel smiled with genuine happiness. "I would be honored to help." As Zarathel went off with Captain Torres, Keck stayed in the clinic with Elena. The boy had become her unofficial assistant, using his empathic abilities to help with patients. When a young Altarian child came in with a broken arm, Kex could sense exactly where the pain was strongest, even when the child was too scared to speak. "You're incredible at this," Elena told him as they finished treating the patient. "You know that, right?" Kex blushed. "On Zephyria, they said I was broken because I can only receive thoughts, not send them." That's ridiculous, Elena said firmly. Some of the best doctors I know are great listeners, not great talkers. You understand people's pain better than any medical scanner. Meanwhile, Mira had started drawing pictures for the other patients in the waiting area. Her artwork showed aliens from different species holding hands and smiling together. The drawings were simple, but beautiful, and they made everyone who saw them feel a little happier. But their peaceful progress was shattered when a new ship docked at the station. Elena was reviewing patient files when Kex suddenly went pale and grabbed her arm. "Dr. Elena," he whispered urgently, "there are people coming. Their thoughts are angry, and they're thinking about us." Elena looked out the clinic window and saw a group of official-looking Zephyrians marching through the station corridors. They wore the dark uniforms of government agents, and their faces were hard with determination. "Zarathel!" Elena called out quickly. "Come back here, now!" The Zephyrian mother hurried back from the cargo bay, still covered in engine grease from her repair work. When she saw the approaching officials through the window, her face went white with fear. "They found us," she whispered. "The reclamation squad. They've come to take us back." Elena's mind raced. She couldn't let these people be taken back to a society that wanted to hurt them. "Stay calm," she said. "Let me handle this." The officials entered the clinic with an air of authority that made everyone else step back. Their leader, a tall Zephyrian with cold eyes and elaborate ceremonial markings, looked around the room with disgust. "I am Commander Vextar of the Purity Enforcement Division," he announced. "We are here to retrieve the genetic deviants known as Zarathel and her offspring." "These people are under medical care," Elena said firmly, stepping between the commander and the family. "You can't just take them." Commander Vextar looked at her with contempt. "Human, you do not understand the situation. These individuals are wanted for genetic contamination and social disruption. They will be returned to Zephyria for proper re-education and sterilization procedures." Elena felt her blood run cold. Sterilization procedures. They weren't just talking about punishment. They were talking about making sure Zarathel could never have more children. "Over my dead body," Elena said quietly, but her voice carried throughout the clinic. "That can be arranged," the commander replied with a cruel smile. "However, we prefer to avoid international incidents. Simply surrender the deviants, and we will leave peacefully." But something unexpected happened. Captain Torres stepped up beside Elena, followed by several station workers who had benefited from Zarathel's engineering expertise. Then came Dr. Patel from the pediatric ward, who had seen how well Kex worked with frightened children. Even some of the regular patients began to gather, including the young Altarian whose broken arm Kex had helped treat. "These people aren't going anywhere," Captain Torres said firmly. "Zarathel fixed problems that our best engineers couldn't solve. Her kids have been helping patients feel better. They're good people." Commander Vextar looked around at the growing crowd with obvious irritation. "You would protect genetic deviants? Do you not understand the contamination risk?" "The only contamination I see," said Dr. Patel, "is the hatred you're spreading." Elena felt her heart swell with pride. She had hoped that showing people the family's true character would make a difference, but seeing it happen was even better than she had imagined. "You have no authority here," Elena told the commander. "This is a neutral station under multi-species law. These people have committed no crimes. They exist," Commander Vextar replied coldly. "That is crime enough." But before the situation could escalate further, Elena's communication console beeped with an incoming priority message. She quickly opened it and smiled for the first time. "All day." "Actually, Commander," she said, holding up the data pad, "I think you're going to want to see this. It's from the Terran Federation Refugee Affairs Office. It seems these people now have official asylum status in human space." The commander's confident expression faltered slightly. "That is impossible. No civilized species would accept genetic deviance. Then I guess we humans aren't civilized, Elena replied with a grin. Because we just did. She looked around at all the faces supporting the family, humans, Altarians, Centaurians, and others, all standing together against prejudice and hate. It was exactly what humanity was supposed to represent, the belief that everyone deserved a chance, regardless of where they came from or what made them different. The real fight was just beginning, but for the first time, Elena felt like they might actually win. Commander Vextar stared at the datapad in Elena's hands with growing anger. His perfect plan to quietly retrieve the outcasts was falling apart before his eyes. The crowd of station residents had grown larger, and their support for the family was becoming impossible to ignore. Human documentation means nothing, he said coldly. These genetic deviants belong to Zephyrian jurisdiction. We will take them by force if necessary, but before he could give orders to his men, another voice cut through the tension. I don't think so, Commander. Everyone turned to see Captain Lisa Chen of the Terran Federation ship New Horizons walking into the clinic. She was a small woman, with steady eyes and the quiet confidence of someone used to making difficult decisions. Behind her walked two Federation security officers, not in a threatening way, but making their presence known. Elena felt relief wash over her. The Federation had responded faster than she had dared to hope. Captain Chen, Elena said gratefully, thank you for coming. Captain Chen nodded and then addressed Commander Vextar directly. Commander, I'm here to inform you that Zarathel and her children are now under the protection of the Terran Federation. Any attempt to remove them against their will would be considered an act of aggression against human space. Commander Vextar's face twisted with fury. You cannot harbor genetic deviance. It goes against all civilized law. Whose law? Captain, Chen asked calmly. Because according to human law, persecuting people for their genetics is what's uncivilized. These people have done nothing wrong except be born different. Kex, who had been quietly listening to everyone's emotions throughout the confrontation, suddenly stepped forward. Despite his young age, he looked directly at Commander Vextar. Sir, he said in his clear young voice, I can feel what you're thinking. You're not just angry, you're scared. You're scared that if people like us are allowed to exist, it means your rules don't matter anymore. The commander's eyes widened in shock. No one had expected the child to speak up, especially not with such insight. You're right to be scared, Kex continued gently. Because kindness is stronger than hate, and there are more kind people in the universe than cruel ones. A hush fell over the crowd. Even Commander Vextar seemed momentarily speechless at the wisdom coming from someone so young. Captain Chen smiled at Kex and then addressed the crowd. This boy and his family represent something important. They represent the idea that our differences make us stronger, not weaker. The Federation has a place for them, and for anyone else who believes in that principle. She turned back to Commander Vextar. You have two choices, Commander. You can leave peacefully or you can try to take these people by force and face the consequences of attacking Federation citizens. For a long moment, the two commanders stared at each other. Finally, Vextar stepped back, his defeat clear on his face. This is not over, he said coldly. The Purity Council will not forget this insult. I hope not, Captain Chen replied. Because every time you remember it, maybe you'll think about whether your laws are really worth the pain they cause. After the Zephyrian officials left, the celebration in the clinic was immediate and joyful. Captain Torres clapped Zarathel on the back, Dr. Patel hugged Kex, and even the young Altarian patient gave Mira one of his toys as a present. But the best news was yet to come. I'm not just here to rescue you, Captain Chen told the family. I'm here to offer you a new home. The Federation has a colony world called New Geneva. It's a place where different species work together, where children are valued for who they are, not what abilities they're born with. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Captain Chen nodded. We'd like you to come too, Dr. Rodriguez. New Geneva needs someone to establish a proper medical facility that serves all species. Your work here has shown us exactly the kind of doctor we need." Elena looked around at the faces of her friends. On the station, Captain Torres, Dr. Patel, and all the others who had stood up for what was right. Then she looked at Zarathel's family, who had become so much more than patients to her. "When do we leave?" she asked with a smile. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in the observation deck of the New Horizons as they approached New Geneva. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents that reminded her of Earth. But what made it special wasn't how it looked. It was what it represented. Beside her, Zarathel held Mira's hand, while Kex pressed his face against the window, his eyes wide with wonder. "Is that really going to be our home?" Mira asked softly. "Yes, little one," Zarathel replied, tears of joy running down her blue-scaled cheeks. "Our real home." As they descended toward the planet's surface, Elena could see the welcoming committee waiting for them at the spaceport. Humans, Altarians, Centaurians, and dozens of other species stood together, holding signs and banners that said "Welcome to New Geneva" in a dozen different languages. 6 months later, Elena's medical center had become the most respected health facility in the sector. Zarathel worked as the chief atmospheric engineer for the colony, her 4 arms and unique skills making her invaluable in building the infrastructure for new settlements. Kex had started training with the Federation's Telepathic Research Division, where his empathic abilities were seen as incredibly valuable for understanding patient needs. And Mira had enrolled in the colony's integrated school, where her artwork decorated the walls, and her gentle nature made her friends with children from a dozen different worlds. But the moment that meant the most to Elena came on a quiet evening, when she was closing up the medical center. Zarathel appeared in the doorway with a small package in her hands. "Dr. Elena," she said formally, "my family owes you everything. Our lives, our freedom, our happiness. It all started with your kindness." Elena shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. You're my friends." Zarathel smiled and handed her the package. Inside was a beautiful piece of art created by Mira. It showed Elena's medical clinic on Kepler Station, but in the picture, the clinic was surrounded by flowers and filled with light. At the bottom, in careful letters, Mira had written, "Where hope begins." "She wanted you to have this," Zarathel explained, "to remember that sometimes one person's kindness can change everything." Elena hung the picture in her office where she could see it every day. It reminded her that in a universe full of fear and prejudice, the simple act of treating someone with dignity and compassion could create ripples that spread farther than anyone could imagine. Sometimes the greatest victories weren't won with weapons or laws, but with the decision to see the humanity in everyone, no matter what species they belonged to or what planet they called home.